Hey everybody. Welcome to welcome to Question Authority. It is the 29th of September and I'm your host. If you watched the last stream, those were um, prayer songs, Lakota prayer songs. The first is just expressing gratitude. The second is asking for strength. And the third is sort of a closing song um, that we typically would sing at the end of a pipe ceremony. And it also expresses gratitude and thanks our ancestors for their support and signals the end of the ceremony. Um, I learned these things in a state prison. If you're wondering why, um, a white man is praying and in the Lakota language, I've learned a lot from the people who we destroyed when my ancestors and other people with pale white skin came to this country under the guise of seeking political and religious freedom and imposed an authoritarian state and set the groundwork for what we see today. The Native Americans were coerced into selling their land, a concept that they truly did not understand. Many early Native American authors will talk about how the idea of owning the ground beneath your feet was completely a foreign concept to them as a people. No society is perfect, no people are perfect. But I think looking back, the original people who dwelled in this land, at least as far as we know, and the people we came and destroyed through disease, stole their land through coercion, and pressed them into essentially what are concentration camps, but with a little bit of a softer look. So we can learn a lot from those who still remain, those who still try to spread a spirituality that was born of the soil that still rests beneath our feet. Now, that's not the topic of this stream. The stream is titled Manufacturing Consent for the Police State Through Fear, Lies, and Propaganda. I hope, anyone who listens to this, anyone who's been listening to me, I hope you never have to experience, if you haven't already, what it is like to be imprisoned, what it is like to be taken out of society and placed in a facility designed to break your spirit. And I found hope in the Lakota prayer ceremonies, and I still carry with me today the things that I learned. But like many people, I struggle with maintaining a healthy balance in my life, with the physical, the spiritual, the emotional, the different categories that we need to be a whole human being, to have positive networks and support around you, to take care of your mind and your body. None of these things are promoted, not truly promoted in our society. The ruling, the ruling ideology of neoliberalism or neoconservatism is to seek profit at at all expenses. to exploit, to take. So not a whole lot has changed since we first came here and destroyed the natives that lived here. Not a whole lot has changed since we dragged slaves from Africa, beat them, tortured them, forced them to work on plantations, forced them to build our society. These foundations that were set, that were laid in what we call America or the United States, those foundations are full of blood and bones. And it's no surprise that that soil still grows the same thing. So, one of the purposes of this stream is to question these narratives that are set up in front of us, to try and see through the lies and the propaganda that we are fed every day, to try to expose the wrongdoers in our society, and to promote an effort to find solidarity with what is the majority of this country, the working class. The working class, just like in a prison system, out on the streets in America, is put through a rigorous process of breaking their spirit. A person working a 9 to 5 job, making minimum wage, can barely do the minimum, can barely focus on the minimum. Most people don't have time to listen to political streams. Most people don't have time to watch anything but maybe a few hours or a few minutes of the nighttime news. So, what I hope to do here is to bring some light into some of the darker parts of our society and expose as much as I can, as best as I can, expose people who are profiting from the suffering of others. I would love to see a shift in this country, and I believe it's underway, but it is a small group of people when you take into account how large this population is. We can only grow if we have a compelling message that is able to reach people, but we cannot compromise. We cannot compromise our ideals in order to get ahead, because the road of compromise, it always leads you to what the status quo already is. We see this in a lot of the squad members that were elected into Congress. We see this in people who, in the beginning, set out to do something good. We see them become changed, and it's no surprise. To change the system, someone said it very well on another stream. This was JB from the Fred Hampton Leftists. He said, what we need are radical, loving, compassionate people. And he was talking about how we negotiate, as we typically negotiate from the bottom. The ask is always very small. And knowing a little bit about negotiations myself, because my full time job is mostly negotiation, you have to start from a strong position and then work your way down with great resistance. So, another person in that stream said, what we need are ruthless humanitarians. When you look on the left today, and you look in the left media space, you see a lot of very soft people. You see a lot of people who are grifting, a lot of people who are just out for their own interests, people who are repeating words of others and trying to gain an audience on the coattails of someone else, like Mike from PA. He streams on Twitch, and he streams right before Hassan Piker. And then he gets off, and Hassan takes over, and they make a lot of money by saying very little. You may watch your stream and think that they're doing something positive, but the problem is we're not seeing any real um, rebellious behavior, if you know what I mean. We need rebels on the left. We need ruthless humanitarians. We need these radical, loving, compassionate people. We need to combine the viciousness that is needed to change a system that is vicious to its very core. If you look at someone like AOC, she's young, she gets into Congress, and I can only guess at what happened with her. I don't know if her intentions were pure from the very beginning, but let's assume that they were. She gets into Congress, and I'm sure it's difficult. It's a lot easier to theorize about these kinds of things. But when the rubber hits the road, when you actually get into an office, I'm sure they have plenty of people with ill intent that saddle themselves up to her. DNC insiders, DC insiders, um, lobbyists. They attract you just like in biblical stories, the devil tempted Jesus with fame and riches. And most of our heroes that really succeeded in bringing us change ended up becoming martyrs. They resisted the allure of fame, they resisted the allure of money, and they resisted the allure of comfort. They resisted the desire to feel safe. If we need people, it's not enough just to run politicians in office and run them and say, don't take corporate money because they found loopholes. They found a way around it. And now they're ultimately saying that we can do it in a good way. We can raise PAC money, but do it in a good way. That is a position we can't compromise on. If we're going to run a politician that's going to get into DC and insulate themselves from all of the people that will try and trick them and try and pretend to be their mentors and then try to push them towards compromise, they will be ineffective and they will be useless. And this needs to be understood before, um, before the next try, if there is a next try. We need people that know the struggle of real life, the struggle of real working people in our society. And then we need people with a backbone. And that, unfortunately, is very much lacking on the left. We need people that are willing to put their bodies and even ultimately their lives on the line, to not compromise, to do what's right just because it's right. Voting for this bill, this Iron Dome bill, the first piece of legislation brought up when Congress reconvened, the first thing they did was give Israel $1 billion to launch missiles at Palestinians. Ultimately, if you're on the left, if you consider yourself a squad member, all of your rhetoric leading up to this point, it says that this is wrong. So it doesn't matter what background deals you think you can make. It doesn't matter what kind of committee seat you think you might get by going along to get along. And you got to be able to resist Nancy Pelosi screaming at you. You have to make sure that they know, even if you risk yourself being an outsider, even if you risk yourself being labeled as a disruptor, it doesn't matter because you want the support of the people. So if you're running on people support, you're not running on corporate support. You need to be loud and you need to be unapologetically strong and stand by your morals and vote no on that bill just because it's wrong. We're watching and we see what they're doing. And it's only if they grow a spine that we'll actually really fully support them again, if we do ever. I like the philosophy, screw me once, shame on me, or shame on you. Screw me twice, shame on me. How many times can we be lied to? I saw a tweet from David Sirota today. David Sirota is one of these people who tries to play the middle. Um, and then we'll get into the topic. So this is what David Sirota said. And this is a man who supported Bernie Sanders and he saw them screw Bernie over. And this is a guy with an inside look at DC, but his perspective is warped. He's too much on the inside. He doesn't think that things can be changed. He really doesn't. And he is another weak actor. We do not need weak people. The people that are tough and that are strong and that are willing to stand up for what's right just because it's right, even when everyone around them is criticizing them for it, those are the people we need to uplift. Those are the people we need to get into office. And people like this we need to completely ignore. I don't think he's a bad person. I think he has good intentions, but I think he is a spineless, weak coward. And there's no place in a real revolution for people like this. They will only come on the side of the revolutionary when they see enough support. And that's not the way that we're going to get anywhere. We need to grow the support from the bottom, and that is a very, very difficult task. We need to get people to cross their hearts and swear that they will never vote for either of these two parties again, because we can spend hours and hours, we can spend days doing an autopsy and rehashing the past 30, 40 years. And we can see that we were lied to and promised hope and change. And every single time when these officials get into office, when these politicians get in there, they don't do what they said they were going to run to do. They don't do what's right just for the sake of it being right. They start to play the game. So it's a good homework assignment for us. It's a good task because it's not just going to be me that can come up with a solution to this problem. But this is where I believe our focus should be. How can you change a system that is corrupt without having it corrupt you? So, what type of person do we need to have? And also, what do we need them to promise? And what do we need to do? What contingencies can we get um, without getting too much into this? Because I don't have a very fleshed out, um, plan of action to tell you the truth. But I think it's something to think about. So, of course, not running with corporate money, that is very important, but it's also not taking on any DC insiders to your team, your advisors, and the people that are around you in this sort of whirlwind, chaotic environment. I'm sure is very frightening and very confusing for most people. But we need people that stand like a rock and are completely immovable. We don't need people that are going to capitulate, that are going to compromise. For one, that's just wrong. And for two, they lose their grassroots support. We lose our motivation. If they vote no on every bill that is evil, that promotes death, that supports weapons manufacturers, that supports the police who are bloated, terrorists, they are thugs and criminals with badges and guns. There is some small need for police for things like violent crime, but that is not their purpose. And their tactics are becoming more and more sophisticated, and our society is becoming more and more of an authoritarian police state. It's just that America is very good at propaganda. America is very good at propagandizing its citizens, and it's been doing it for a very, very long time. And even the people that we think are on our side, ultimately, they soften their message and they become weak. So people like Vosh, people like Mike from PA, people like the Majority Report, people like David Sirota, even people like AOC, they are not strong enough to wade into difficult waters. They will only keep their feet in the ocean. They won't go out. They won't ride a wave because it terrifies them. AOC showed some spine when she first ran, so maybe she can find it again. But I think that that satanic or that devilish deal that you make when you say, okay, yes, I'll take some of that money, I'll take that power, I'll take that praise, I'll go along to get along, and I'll feel good about myself, and I'll sleep well, and I'll twist myself into a pretzel to convince myself that all of my actions are just and righteous. So David Sirota is one of these apologetics for a feckless and ineffective attempt to change the Democratic Party from the inside. We know 100%, we know that it will not happen. And we can prove it by looking at recent history and even going further back. So David Sirota said, many people who say Dems can do no wrong do no work to actually make Dems actually do right. That is not true. What does David Sirota do besides tweet and talk on a webcam? So he's criticizing people who are criticizing the Democrats. These people exist to pretend to be progressive revolutionaries in order to make you feel comfortable about taking the easy road and just voting blue. He says many people who say every voter is bad for voting for Dems in a horrible duopoly do no work to actually create a different option. There are many activist organizations. Movement for a People's Party is who I support, is who I volunteer for. So we are trying to create a third party that stands for the working class. We're trying to create an alternative to the two-party duopoly. And we have seen it fail us over and over and over again. He said both sets of folks offer a whole lot of laziness. I would argue that for one, this tweet is very condescending. And also, one second. It's very condescending. Hold on. I'll be right back. So, um, he talks about laziness as if these activists that are out on the street are lazy, as if everyone is just online, just criticizing Democrats and not doing anything. That is not true. So, let me try to find this. Um, there's so many. There are so many activist organizations currently doing things out on the street today. There are so many of them that you can't even keep track of them all. So instead of David Sirota saying, as if he's talking to children, that you're lazy and you're just criticizing the Democrats, take a look at one organization and what they just did. This is the Never Again action. They say we are Jews, immigrants, and allies taking direct action to abolish ICE so that they can no longer persecute immigrants And they went out to the DHS secretary who oversees ICE under Joe Biden, and they put this on his house. Biden presidency, Trump policy, keep your promises. David, we're not just online. He says you're not helping anyone by sitting there lazily tweeting Team Blue hashtags. You're also not helping anyone, and you're not smarter than everyone. Just sitting there lazily tweeting, aha, but you voted for them last election, which means you're the problem. People who vote Democrat need to be convinced that their vote is for a right-wing authoritarian party. So this was my response. We're trying to grow a third-party support, and the Democrats are entirely corrupted. You can see 2016 and 2021 Bernie Sanders run. They've written books about this. They've shown the underhanded tactics that the DNC used to destroy Bernie Sanders. You can go back to Bill Clinton and Joe Biden and see the 1994 crime bill and the Telecommunications Act. The crime bill expanded the prison industrial complex, and the Telecommunications Act narrowed the amount of companies that produce media. So in this very thin media monopoly, it's very easy to produce propaganda. And what this stream is going to be about, and what I'm going to keep hammering on, are these literal CIA operatives who are operating right out there in the open. And they go on MSNBC and they go on CNN, and they never disclose. They write articles for the New York Times, and they don't disclose that they work for police departments, that they work for the CIA, that they have a conflict of interest. There are so many out there creating and manufacturing consent for a police state. So, see the first agenda item during eviction crisis. I went over this in the beginning. So, if that's what the Democratic Party does, if they do performative actions in front of Congress and then get eviction moratorium struck down and don't reconvene Congress, and then once Congress reconvenes, they vote for more war, more money for war, and then a bunch of the squad members vote yes to that bill or vote present and show us that they don't have a spine in real time. These are the type of things that you should be pointing out, David. And you should be telling people not to vote for Democrats and not to vote for Republicans either. We spend a lot of time criticizing Democrats because we think that everyone already automatically knows that the Republicans are bad too. So maybe we need to even up our coverage a little bit. But there's plenty of grifters out there that do nothing but shit on right-wing people, the craziest of them. And they make money by that because people eat it up. So we need to prove to people, more so on the left, that they need to stop supporting the Democrats. Then we need to prove to people on the right that they need to come over to our side. I don't know if I said that very well. But anyways, I'm just going to leave the stream going for a little bit. And I'm going to be back in about 30 minutes or so. Okay, so I'm going to ask a question. These politicians that all run, do you buy that bullshit when they try to appear that they really represent the working class? They all have their stories, right? They all tell their little folksy stories about how their mom and dad struggled. More often than not, they come from privileged backgrounds. They come from wealthy families, wealthy homes, and they go to very expensive schools. And more than half of the United States presidents were lawyers. 7 or 8 of them went to Harvard Law School. And that in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing. But why are we electing people to represent us that come from a class that cannot even possibly hope to understand who we are and who the average working class person is and what their struggles are and what they go through in their daily life? So, the salaries and benefits for members of the US Congress, and I think it's about the same for the Senate, it's about $174,000 that they make. The majority party leader in the Senate makes $193,000. The Speaker of the House makes $223,500. So they're making around $200,000 a year, where the median income for average people in the United States is about $67,000, and it decreased 2.9% since 2019. Families' household income decreased 3.1%, 3.2. The median house income of non-whites, not Hispanic whites, Asians, and Hispanics decreased from their median 2019 incomes. Changes in black households was not statistically different. In 2020, real median household incomes decreased 3.2% in the Midwest, 2.3% in the South and the West from the 2019 medians. So you're looking at a society of people where poverty rates are rising, incomes are dropping, earnings are dropping, and your average person probably makes somewhere between 30,000 to, I don't know, 50 or $60,000 a year. Why are we electing? First off, just as a first, why is the income for our representatives, our quote unquote public servants, 3 or 4 or 5 times the amount of an average American? They get gold plated insurance, so they don't have to worry about anything. So we have the people that are above us that are making laws and making policies that are living large off of our tax dollars. Why would we not have our system set up so that they only make what the median income for the average person is? So they only make $67,000 a year. Wouldn't that incentivize them to live like we do and then to fight for changes that would benefit the majority of the people in the country? Now, we all know that politics is a game of backroom deals, backroom handshakes. They make much more than their 173,000 or $200,000 a year when they're guaranteed to move into some sort of consulting position after they leave office, when they retire with a very, very healthy pension. Getting into politics is it's a very profitable game. So that's one big flaw in our system. So maybe we can add that to our agenda. Members of Congress and the Senate can only make what the median household income is for people in the United States. But unfortunately, even when they first get in there, they're hopelessly, hopelessly out of touch. I'm going to move from that topic and we're going to take a look back into what we covered a few days ago and the CIA infiltrators inside of the media space, writing articles for mainstream publications like the New York Times and appearing on CNN, MSNBC. And the first person that brought this to my attention is this guy here. So let's take a look at his video. This is Alec.
With. The decision about whether to keep them in a jail cell or not is made on the basis of how much money they have in their pocket. Our jails around this country are places in which we inflict enormous pain. People are deprived of fresh air and sunlight and exercise. They're victims of sexual and physical violence and stabbings and beatings. These are places of family separation. And all of it is happening in Harris County and all over the country solely because people can't make a monetary payment. Before your bail hearing, you were ordered not to speak.
Don't say anything. All of you are here to listen and not talk. You're not here to argue about anything to do with the case.
Are you requesting the court to appoint you a lawyer, or are you going to hire your own lawyer?
The court lawyer. But I had to say something, man. I was coming from
you don't
work.
have to say anything, Mr. English. You get to say that to your court-appointed lawyer. Thank you. You can go with the deputy.
It's not really a very meaningful hearing if the person who the hearing is about, whose life is on the line, can't even utter a word. And so one of the things we saw over and over again in these videos were magistrates making fun of people who were arrested for sleeping under a bridge, yelling at people, doubling their money bail if they said yeah instead of yes, inflicting such pain and such cruelty on an everyday level to the point where that kind of brutality became normalized in Harris County. The people that worked in that system didn't even notice it because they were doing it 20,000 times every single year. And it's that system that we sued, and it's that system that's unconstitutional. It's that system that our law The same thing that was happening in Harris County is happening to varying degrees in virtually every other city and town in this country. And there's a growing movement all over the country that recognizes the incredible unfairness and injustice and ineffectiveness of a system that bases access to liberty and to bodily freedom on the amount of money you have in your wallet.
So some of these reforms that have been very hard won and hard fought for, there's a concerted effort to try and take them back. I like how Alec calls it the criminal punishment bureaucracy. the type of language that we use is very important. And to call a system of exploitation, a system of punishment, um, and a system that just steals money from poor people, the criminal justice system just feeds into that manufactured consent for the police state. So these streams, some of them are now going to be about exposing CIA operatives that are in our media spaces, that are on MSNBC, on CNN. They're writing articles for the New York Times, and they're not disclosing that they actually literally work for police departments. One of the culprits, his name is Jeff Asher. Jeff Asher works for a sheriff's department. And what he does is he tries to post slanted statistics, trying to promote the idea that murder is going up. Now, why would the CIA, why would the government want to promote a narrative that says that murder is going up in our society? When we did this in another stream, we looked at companies like Aramark um, and the multiple billions of dollars that they make each year exploiting the family members of prisoners. They run the commissaries. And there's other companies, other large companies, that do the same thing. So they sell you cheap, unhealthy food, but in prison they barely feed you anything. So you're surviving on rations and you're at the point almost of starvation in between meals. They give you just enough so that you don't fall on the floor and die. And then you have companies like Aramark that are set up so you can beg your family for money, or you can work in the jail. So you can work in the jail for usually something like $1 a day. I worked in a kitchen in a county jail. I would work a 10-hour shift, washing pots and pans for $1 a day. They have industries that are in a lot of the state prisons that produce things for the outside world. In California, famously, they have prisoners fighting forest fires, putting their lives on the line. But they make the conditions inside of these places. They make the conditions so terrible, the isolation so terrible, that going out and fighting a forest fire seems very attractive to you, whether it's just from boredom or whether it's for the small amount of money that they might pay you to give to Aramark to support their $1 billion industry of selling garbage to people in prison. And then you have the bail industry. So the bail industry is set up, and they have loan sharks, and some of them have very popular TV shows. You have to remember that most of the people in prison are not violent offenders. What they want to do is they want to take away our compassion for our fellow man and woman. They want to take away our compassion and paint a narrative as if they're protecting us from murderers and rapists and dangerous people in our society. But that's not what they're doing. So, I believe 2/3 of the 1,200,000 something thousand people that are in prison right now are there for non-violent offenses, but they're locked inside of cages. And then you have the telephone industry inside of prison. Companies like Securus, and there was some sort of monopolistic takeover of that. So the Pistons owner, I believe the Detroit Pistons owner, here's a good article. So let's take a look at this. Kelly Schaefer. This could be your mom. This could be your neighbor down the street. This could be your teacher in school. This could be the person that bags up your groceries at the supermarket. This could be the person that drives your Uber. This could be, and this is, just an average working person in the country. Kelly Schaefer worries that there might come a time when she can't afford to talk to her teenage son in jail. The 44-year-old mother estimates that she spends $100 a month for her son to call her every other day from Muskegon County Jail. When you get on these phones, you get about maybe 5 minutes to talk to your family. 15 minutes, here we go. $3.15 for a 15-minute call, plus fees, because they have to add the money on a website and they have to create an account. And so they get charged a fee and then they can deposit the money for them to call. This is an old school telephone with a cord attached to a wall. And on the big housing unit that you have in a prison, you're allowed out of your cell, I don't know, maybe 9 hours. No, every 2 hours, you probably get an hour or two out. Depends. Different jails do it different ways. But let's say altogether, maybe you get 6 hours out of your little tiny, um, I don't know, 8 by 12 cell. And you can go and use one of these phones if you want to wait in line. There are prisons like Philadelphia County jails where you can be stabbed, literally stabbed, for either a ramen noodle soup that Aramark makes billions of dollars selling to prisoners all over this country, or for using the telephone when someone else is trying to use it. So, those are the types of environments that nonviolent people are being placed into. So, before getting into the prison jail bail system, let's just take a look at this. So, Schaefer was laid off and out of work for most of the pandemic and managed the cost of calls on her husband's salary. These are poor people being exploited. 3 and 15 for a 15-minute call. He's an 18-year-old kid. How do you tell him he can't talk to you? So I don't know what he's in jail for, and it really doesn't matter. Of course, in our society, if we have murderers and scary people running around, but that's a very small majority of the people in this country. Most of us are just working. We're trying to get by, and sometimes we make mistakes. So, making a mistake, getting put into this criminal punishment bureaucracy, is very costly to you and your family. It is a gigantic industry. How cynical is our society that we've created a multi-billion-dollar industry based off of locking nonviolent people up into a cage and torturing them? Hey, Code Dancer, very nice to meet you as well. Uh, Follow the stream, very much appreciate it. So Tom Gores purchased Securus. This is the owner of the Detroit Pistons. So Securus joined a $1.2 billion prison telecom industry that makes its money from incarcerated people and their families. So you have Aramark, you have Securus, and you have the prison bail industry. So already we're adding up just with phone calls and just with buying ramen noodle soups and garbage food. You have probably 10, 12, maybe 20, who knows, but billions of dollars just to exploit poor people, most of whom are in prison for no good reason. And then you have the bail industry. So this is how it works. Oh, um, yeah, I'm trying to get my audio better, and sometimes it's not set up right. How is that? Is that better? Yeah, no, none of my content is behind a paywall. So hopefully the audio is a little bit better. Um, just one second. Yeah, so I'm gonna have to step away from the stream. Thanks for telling me about the audio. I'm pretty new to this, but appreciate it. Definitely, one goal of this is to grow an audience to get these kinds of messages out there. I'll have to come back and finish up the stream in a little bit. But the prison bail industry, the Prison Policy Initiative does much better articles than Mother Jones. So I'm gonna come back in about 20 minutes and we'll take a look at the prison bail industry. But we're talking about multiple billions of dollars, and bail in prison is just a way to exploit poor people who are scared, who are in terrible conditions, and coerce them, coerce them into um, signing a plea bargain and pleading guilty. So if you have money, you can get out of jail, you can fight your case on the street. But there's a lot of politics wrapped up in this as well. And politicians get votes for being tough on crime because people like this, Jeff Asher, a paid operative of the CIA and of the prison industrial complex and the police department, he skews statistics and he tries to paint a picture as if murder and crime is raising when it's not. He tries to paint a picture as if bail reform has caused more crime when it has not. So I'm going to get into this, and yep, I'll be back. I'll be back in about 20 minutes. So I'll leave the stream up. Thanks for watching, and we're going to go through this Twitter thread from Alec and talk a little bit more about how corrupt this for-profit criminal punishment bureaucracy is, and expose some of the operatives that are in the mainstream media and their conflicts of interest are never given, they're never exposed. So I'll be back in 20. Yes, I am very much against the boutique left. Let me make sure microphone is off. Okay, back. The audio is fixed. All right, dive right back into the Jeff Asher. Yes, against the boutique left. The problem with these guys, and I talked about it earlier in the stream. These are spineless cowards. So most of the media nowadays, like what they do essentially, they don't really do investigative journalism very much anymore. What they do is they just repeat each other's stories. They repeat each other's talking points. One person writes a story, and then like 5 or 10 different outlets pick it up, and they just copy paste and change a few words. It's pretty disgusting that these people are so well paid. Like these talking heads on the news, these people get contracts to be the contributors to MSNBC. People like Sam Cedar, they don't dive into the sources of this information, and that's what journalists are supposed to do. That's what the idea of the fourth estate is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a check and a balance on the corruption within the government, the corruption within society. They're supposed to be out there sounding the alarm, but what they're doing is they're just uncritically repeating CIA propaganda. Like 50% of what they produce is that. And what do they want to do? What do these operatives want to do? Well, they want to scare you. They want you to be afraid. Fear sells. Fear in the media, it sells. I keep going back to Bill Hicks in this stream, but he's got a great joke about the news. It's like you see on the news and they say, well, war, murder, death, famine, and then you open the window and you look outside and you hear crickets. So that's how it is. That's how it works. And if you tune out, turn these fucking mainstream media sources off, you can see the world for what it really is. Don't let it color your perspective with fear. So Jeff Asher is basically an operative of the CIA, the police state. And he is also a very big proponent of these sort of draconian majority report type of predictive policing models. So I'm going to have to put together some more stuff about these predictive policing models. There was a model that was used in New York City. And what it did was it targeted poor, marginalized communities. And they sent tons of resources into these communities to lock people up for minor offenses, throw young black people up against the wall and search them for no reason whatsoever. They didn't need any reason. So it's supposed to be where in the society we have freedoms, right? We have the freedom of speech. We have the freedom against search and seizure. So a cop, it wants to come into your house, they have to get a warrant. They have to show probable cause. If they want to search you on the street, they have to have probable cause. But stop and frisk took that away completely. And the way that they get away with this stuff, the way they get people to jump on board with it, is because the media produces a state of fear. They try and scare you. They try to spin statistics. They try and lie to you, just outright lie to you. This guy, Jeff Asher, just outright lies in an article in the New York Times about murder rates rising when they're actually not. And he lies about cash bail, this billion-dollar industry that exploits poor people who are placed in an environment that tortures them until they sign a plea agreement and plead guilty for a crime. Whether they're innocent or whether they're guilty, they don't get an opportunity to speak. So I showed the video that Alec made, where they show these judges in courtrooms, and I've sat there and I've seen it. I shared a story in one of my streams about a guy that I saw come in front of a judge in Bucks County, and he came in with hospital scrubs on, and he was on the street, so he must have probably gotten his family to pay their bail, and got out. He got out for a minor crime, and they put him up in front of a judge who's callous and arrogant. These entitled people that we elect as judges, unfortunately, because everyone is so scared and afraid of crime, the crime that they manufacture. They're trying to convince us that everything is much worse than it really is, because people like to see explosions. We have all of these TV shows that try to portray cops breaking the law and going, against their regulations. They do these things on fictional stories that are created for us that we swallow down whole. and they make it seem like a cop breaking the law is actually in your best interest. So there's a massive amount of propaganda. Yeah, Glenn Greenwald. I was looking up some of his stuff actually right before I got back on, because look at this guy Jeff Asher. So Grand Belialski sent me a Greenwald tweet. I'll take a look at that. And then these media personalities and fake journalists are maniacs and must be stopped. Absolutely. How can we allow someone to get away with this? How can we allow media organizations to put a person who's paid by the police department to get in front of the camera or to write an article for the New York Times and lie about murder rates rising, a lie about cash bail causing a rise in crime, or the elimination of cash bail causing a rise in crime, because their interests are in making money. It really is all it's about. It's about making money. This country never wanted to let go of slavery. And so when they passed the 13th Amendment, they left a clause in it saying that if you were a criminal, if you were arrested, then they can turn you into a slave. And right now in this country, there's more than 1,200,000 people in jail, and two-thirds of them are nonviolent offenders that have no business being inside of a cage, being tortured on a daily basis through hunger. They're in dangerous environments around people that, there are violent people that should be taken away from society because they're a danger to their fellow man or woman. And but that's a very, very small percentage. They couldn't get away with, they shut down industries in small towns. And that goes into the whole monopolization of industry in our country, and how these gigantic organizations like Amazon or Walmart, their power is never reeled back in. They'll shut down all the working factories in a town, like in upstate Pennsylvania, and then they'll make a giant prison there. And they'll build a huge prison. And so they have all these people who sign on to become prison guards. And you know what? These prison guard lobbies that are fighting against the legalization of marijuana, I have one thing to say to you. You need to find a real job. You need to find a better job. Move out of that town that only has an prison for employment. Go work somewhere else, because you are supporting a Nazi-like system. This is evil. This is cruelty to humanity on a massive scale. And if you feel sympathy for these prison guards or these police officers not being able to make a living and keep their careers because they're not allowed to manufacture overblown crime statistics, then you're twisted. You're twisted in the head. You fed into the propaganda. You fed into the lies that have been fed you by guys like Jeff Asher. This man is a CIA operative. And take a look at where he publishes his articles, because this is very disturbing. You mentioned Glenn Greenwald. Look at Jeff Asher. Jeff Asher is a crime analyst based in New Orleans and co-founder of Dialytics. So The Intercept leaves out that he's paid by a sheriff's office and employed by them, and he was a CIA, and probably still is, a CIA officer. So he is trying to spread propaganda. This is what, sort of like a spook looks like on LinkedIn. Analyst, United States Department of Defense. Analyst, U.S. federal government, working on defense-related issues. And then analyst, City of New Orleans, embedded in the New Orleans Police Department multi-agency gang unit. There's so many levels to this. This is massive levels to this. But let's kind of I'll try to reel it in, because sometimes I jump, all over the place. And real quick, take a look at this Glenn Greenwald tweet. So let's copy, paste. So Glenn Greenwald, let's see, Confessions of the Liberal Mind. It's obvious that these are the factions animating sentiments and impulses. They're just not usually this candid about it. Points for honesty and self-reflection, I guess, but just ponder what mindset like this will produce if it spreads. So let's see, Saeed Jones. I hate this. I hate what we're doing to each other 18 months in, and I feel like the pandemic and the protracted costly selfishness that seems rampant has pushed me to a point of cruelty I didn't know I had in me. I'm angry, sad, and bitter. This isn't who I want to be. So let's see. Cruelty, anger, and bitterness, their own words for describing their state of mind. Gee, why would anyone become alienated from a political and cultural faction shaped by those core sentiments and drives? I wish I knew exactly what he was talking about, but this makes sense. So the confession of a liberal mind. So the problem is like with COVID. So COVID happened. COVID hit and everybody had to confine inside of their homes. These sort of like boutique leftists, these are people that play the game. They put on the clothes of a revolutionary. They act like they're fighting for something, but they're really just spineless cowards. So a lot of people's brains were broken, and that's why you see, there's been a very successful media propaganda campaign to demonize people that are afraid of getting a vaccine. Even though Joe Biden himself and Nancy Pelosi and all of these people that are telling you that they're going to mandate vaccines, they were all afraid of the vaccine when Trump was in office and said that they would be worried about taking it. So the government mishandled this crisis. They locked people in their homes, but they didn't provide them with any real help or support. They scared people, and then most people can't handle it, and that's why they're so willing to lash out at people who are afraid of, a medical procedure that is very new. So I was vaccinated. I did get it, and I got a little bit sick the first time. The first shot, it got me a little bit sick. I took the second shot. I didn't feel that bad. And I got it mainly, because of pressure, because I want to like travel and go to different places. So it's fucked up because, um, I'm one of those people that gave in. I was really worried about getting it, and I thought I had it like very early on, and I didn't get sick the whole entire time. And I was out there working. And before these vaccines came out, there was a lot of pressure on the government for mishandling this crisis. The narrative was starting to shift to the people that are really accountable for this, for mishandling it or the origins of it. But now that there's a vaccine, everybody thinks that that's going to magically fix the whole issue if everyone gets vaccinated. But take a look at Israel. I mean, more than 70% of the country is vaccinated. They've done booster shots, and people are still getting infected. And then I think you have a country like, I forget, it was Iceland or somewhere where they've downgraded COVID and just said they're going to treat it like the common cold or the flu because they do have treatments for it now. But they're demonizing treatments in order to get more money for pharmaceutical companies, and they're also shifting the blame. They're shifting the blame from the people that are responsible to your average everyday citizen. That's what they do. They divide and they conquer. They want us fighting against each other and not fighting against the establishment that oppresses us. Graham Belsky says, when everyone got vaxxed back in April, that should have been the end of it. They just keep politicizing the issue now. Yeah, there's a couple of different levels to this. So one level is that Biden is going to run his reelection campaign, and a lot of these Democrats are going to run on high vaccination rates. So it's a tool. It's a political tool. Just like saying I'm tough on crime is a political tool because they've manufactured fear and overblown the reality of violent crime in this country. They've manufactured fear of drug addicts. CNN, I think Jimmy Dore was covering a good story on CNN, publishing an article that sounds like it's ripped from the 1930s, like reefer madness era, where they talk about people vomiting from marijuana. Listen, I was a pothead for many, many years, and I worked a regular job, and I smoked pot every single fucking day. And I was not a threat or a danger to society at all. I had lots of friends and lots of people around me that smoked weed. We were the most peaceful and, productive in our own way, but we worked and we took care of our lives and we didn't pose a threat to anyone in society. Marijuana is not a dangerous drug and it should not be illegal. But because of the billions and billions of dollars that are invested in this incarceral punishment complex, this prison industrial complex that raises billions of dollars from just exploiting people. So the media and sort of the security state, they prey on our fear of the other. They propagandize us from every level, at every angle, in order to shift the blame away from them to the normal working person that's right next to you. So, even if everyone gets vaccinated, I don't think this is going to go away. And, I shouldn't say much about the vaccine. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical expert. I only know the way these things typically work. And, if we can all wake up to, just trace the money, trace who benefits, take a look at the source. Who's the source of this information? Like, let's go back to this tweet. So we've got Alex here, and this guy, Jeff Asher, he posted this fucking terrible New York Times article. And I want to get to, let's see. Okay, so we covered this on one of the other streams, but I want to keep going. So, New York Times doubling down. Let's see. So, the first quote is a police chief blaming rising murder on bail reform. As FWDUS and I showed, this is false and disproved police union and for-profit bail industry hackery. It's like climate denial. So, years of rigorous evidence and social science research show that reducing cash bail dramatically reduces crime for years to come. Here's one recent example of bail reforms from the very period New York Times discusses without increase in even short-term crime. So the New York Times article, in part informed by the CIA operative Jeff Asher, who writes for The Intercept, so they're not a trustworthy organization because they're in bed with the police state. If they're going to publish articles like him and write his bio without saying that he benefits monetarily from an increase in policing and a fear of murders rising when they're not, a fear of cash bail causing more crime when it doesn't cause more crime, because he's going to fill his pockets with money if everyone is scared of crime rates rising. So, I have no sympathy for the police unions. I have no sympathy for the prison guard unions. You need to start looking for a different job because you are only serving to hurt the people that are actually in your own class. The median income is something like $67,000. I don't know what these police officers, these correctional officers make. Maybe they make 70, 80. But they are in essentially and usually are in the same class as the people they're locking up. They're just trained, they're propagandized to hate anyone who is labeled a criminal. And the criminal justice system is set up so that you don't get a fair trial, you don't get a fair hearing, especially for minor crimes. They are going to force you and torture you until you take a deal because they want to keep their conviction rates high. The same way the policing in New York City, they pressured low-level police officers from the top to make more arrests. They have quotas. How can they have quotas in our society? Like, shouldn't be the goal? Shouldn't the goal be to minimize crime, right? That should be the goal. Like, let's find ways to put less people in prison because we're taking care of the issues in our society that causes crime. That is not the goal. So these people, these bureaucrats in these police departments, they pressure the low-level police officers to make more arrests because then it makes them look good because they can say, well, we are doing good work at reducing crime. And then they get more funding from the federal government and they can hire more police. They can raise their salaries. So it's a system that feeds off of a continuation of criminalizing minor activities in our society, placing people in jail when they should be given a fine or they should be given something like community service, holding them in prison because they don't have the money to pay their bail. So bail reform is not the issue. So in Texas, Alec, they sued and they struck down money bail for I think all like low level crimes, and there was no increase in crime in the period that they try and tell you that murders are rising. So let's see. But the article by Neil MacArthur gets worse. It cites a parade of police and paid police consultants that opine on the causes, and in parentheses, all more money for cops. This media practice has to stop. Police officials and people who get paid by the police are not the only experts on policing. So just like when we pulled out of Afghanistan, all the people, I think Matt Taibbi did a good breakdown and analysis of that. Um, uh, Right. This was part of the. I like useful idiots, and there's a comment to his article. It says, "I've said this before, and I'll say it again. They should all be required to wear prominent patches on their suits of their sponsors, like NASCAR drivers." So these people that get on MSNBC, these people that get on CNN, they do not expose, or they don't. The networks do not show their conflict of interest. So let's see. Uh, like these people got on the news. They got on the media. These people that benefit from war. So this is a guy that was on the board of Lockheed Martin. And he says, my concern is that it could get worse before it gets better. They wanted us to stay in Afghanistan, not because we were doing good humanitarian work, not because we were protecting the country from terrorists, but because they were taking money from the tax base of the United States, like Julian Assange said, and washing it through this forever war and bringing it right back into the pockets of these companies that profit from war. And then they get people on the news and they call them analysts, they call them experts. But this is a guy that they end up being on the board of Lockheed Martin and things like that. So they have huge conflicts of interest. Let's see. He says, I would recommend that we keep in place the country a highly trained force of at least about 2,500 or so for counterterrorism purposes. They're like, we're going to lose money. Please put more troops back into this country where we were there for 20 years. We spent $300 million a day, and we accomplished nothing but just causing more pain and suffering for the people who live there. Um, so I guess this is all about Jed Johnson, who was all over the mainstream media news networks and telling and promoting fear and telling us that we needed to stay in Afghanistan, not disclosing, none of the networks disclosed that he is on the board of Lockheed Martin. What does Lockheed Martin do? Lockheed Martin makes military equipment, fighter jets, strategic tanker. These are multi-million-dollar projects, satellites in space. Take a look at what Jeff Bezos recently did. You know, we have these billionaires going up into space. These people that hoard a majority of the wealth of this country and pay almost zero taxes for the most part. So they're just going up into space because it's fun. We're gonna try to go to Mars. Guess what happened after they spent all that money? And you know, Jeff Bezos was given $10 million of your money. That little bit of money that comes out of your paycheck every time you get paid. They took some of that. They pulled it all together because this country has socialism for the rich and rugged individualism for the poor. And they gave Jeff Bezos, a man who is going to be a trillionaire, a man who could snap his fingers and end world hunger, who could snap his fingers and end homelessness, and still fly around in a private jet for the rest of his life and have 10 different houses on different exotic locations in the world. This man will never suffer or want for anything, and he could do so much good with that money. But what are these people doing? Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos bid to build U.S. military rockets. And it looks like the article is behind a paywall. I saw a really good article about this. I don't know where it came from. But anyways, we'll get back into that. But let's take a look at this article. So let's see. So it gets much worse. The article twice quotes pro police sources for the opinion that an increase in crime is a result of police being less proactive. So they don't want to just respond to crime, they want to be proactive, like stop and frisk. They want to send essentially a gang of thugs out into the streets to extort money for us for the sake of gigantic corporations that make billions of dollars. The human cost is immense. The pain and the suffering that someone who is imprisoned goes through is almost indescribable. If you haven't experienced it, I hope that you never do. But it is such incredible torture, such incredible pain. Just the feeling of losing your freedom is bad enough. But then you sit inside of a jail cell and you're told nothing. You could have been homeless and down and out, living in a tent on the street, and they do a sweep. They also, it's another thing they send billions of dollars into because the rich and the elite in this country and the co opted people who go along with it, just like the people who served the Nazis and then said, I was only following orders. These propagandized people, whether they know it or not, they serve a security state, a military state, a police state that will blow back on them just like it will on anyone else. Because unless you're up here with Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, unless you have massive amounts of power and money, you can fall victim to the same system just like anybody else. And they can take your freedom away from you. So it gets much worse. The article twice quotes pro-police sources from the opinion that an increase in crime is a result of police being less proactive. First, all crime other than murder is down. Second, it's pure propaganda that police reduce crime. Police manufacture crime. Police go out and seek out crime. Police will pull you over and try and search your car to find drugs if they haven't met their quota. They are not there to make our society better. They are there to keep a system moving that generates billions of dollars of profits for a very small handful of companies. So let's see. Virtually everything you're told about crime data is wrong, it's misleading, and asking the wrong question about what makes us safe, especially bad, is a consistent evidence-free link of police to crime. So let's take a look at this thread. If you don't follow Alex Taxis on Twitter, you should. So let's see here. If you're wondering, not a single shred of evidence links a pullback by police to more murder. The reason the New York Times cites unnamed analysts is that it's not a claim anyone reputable will associate with their name publicly. And then we get into Plantair. And this is where it gets scary. Looking at the chat. Thanks, man. Thanks for subbing on YouTube. Yeah, I know Twitch is like, it seems like Twitch may be a good way to grow an audience, but I think YouTube is probably a much better platform. And yeah, Matt Binder is a real piece of shit. You know, these people, they're just apologists for the Democratic Party. They're, you know, they may produce some content that you could say is good, but they're not actually going to accomplish anything positive because they're weak and they're afraid of scorn. They're afraid of being pushed to the margins with the people that are actually telling the truth. So they're just going to simp for the Democratic National Committee, this corrupt organization that is irredeemable. And they're going to push back on efforts to create a viable third party. So third party doesn't have to win. That shouldn't even be our goal. I mean, ultimately it would be our goal, but that's not necessarily why we want to grow a third party like Movement for People's Party. The reason to grow a third party is to threaten from the left the two major parties because they stand in a right wing conservative space. Both of them do. Both of them are pro Wall Street, and both of those parties are irredeemable. They're unchangeable. If you can't see that after Bernie's 2 runs, then you're blind and you're not paying any attention. But people, if you're watching Matt Binder, if you're watching the Majority Report, you're going to be lulled to sleep. It's a siren song. It's it's um, it's just a way to keep people from rebelling. The system sees that massive amounts of people came out for Bernie. The establishment is afraid, but they're not afraid of people like Matt Binder. They're not afraid of people like Majority Report. And they are mostly boring shows. And they make excuses for their favorite politicians. And the thing is, if we want politicians to act, we have to pressure them. When people go out, like when the People's Party goes out or other activist organizations, and they actually protest at politicians' houses, the politicians do something. So they're not going to want you to do that. They may give lip service to some of those ideas, but then they'll fight against something like force the vote. If the squad had stood up and challenged Nancy Pelosi's power, even if they failed, if they were really principled and they voted their conscience, if they didn't care about their continued position and their continued celebrity, and they really kept the same message that they had when they ran and they voted like that, they would have people like me and I'm sure a lot of other people still behind them, still fighting for them. But now all they have are these weak pundits, people like Mike from PA, people like that work at TYT, and people like Matt Binder and the Majority Report. They have them behind them no matter what. And there's a problem if you support someone no matter what, because you've lost your objectivity. And the only way to really create any true change in this country is to be objective. And you can't just give them a pass. You can't give a politician a pass just because you like them. And you saw, like, they had a chance to pressure Pelosi, they had a chance to scare her, and they could have even gotten rid of her because she does have a massive amount of power in Congress. So you see that C-SPAN video where she's screaming and yelling at AOC and flapping her arms around the air. What kind of leverage does she have over these people? She's like this is essentially, a lot of this is formed just like a mafia or a gang organization. So AOC votes no on the funding of $1 billion to this missile dome project in Israel, which is a disgusting display of misplaced priorities. Because, a few months before that, Cory Bush and AOC were on the steps of the Congress pretending to do a protest, a sanctioned protest that was actually called, technically, according to Congress, it was a press conference. We found that out when the Movement for a People's Party went down there, and they locked up 4 people for using a bullhorn on the steps to do the exact same thing. So they went out and did a performative action right before fundraising season for the midterms. And they used that. They made videos, they made posts, they highlighted themselves, and they tried to still paint themselves as these revolutionaries. But they left, and they wanted us all to go back to sleep. Some of us didn't, but the people, most of us, went back to sleep. Moratorium is extended. Nobody took any time to really look into the moratorium. So if you look into the moratorium, you can see that it was only kicking the can down a road to try and keep passing out funding that has been allocated. So they means test these things, and they have, they don't, when they give money to big corporations, like in the financial crisis, they don't say, we're going to monitor everything you do with this money. You have to submit to an audit. You have to, we have to see exactly what you're going to do. You can't raise any bonuses for these companies. You guys made bad business decisions. You're lucky that we're bailing you out. We're going to nationalize your organization. They don't do any of that shit. They just give them money, no strings attached, and nobody gives a fuck about it. But if you're going to give a few $100s to people for food through food stamps, everybody gets up in arms. Why is that? It's because people are sucking down propaganda all the time. Why is it that everyone supports the police and everybody is okay with the police taking military equipment and using it on their own citizens in the street? Everyone's okay with that because the mainstream media produces manufacturers consent for the police state because they tell you to be afraid of murder rates rising and they tell you to be afraid of crime rising. And you look outside and you look on the street and you see nothing. You know what I see when I walk out down the street? I see people, more and more homeless people, just sleeping outside. I'm here in Philadelphia, PA, and it's sad. This system just creates misery and pain, but not for the guys at the top. And they're out of touch. They don't care. $174,000 a year is a lot of goddamn money for most people. But most of the people that are in Congress, they still think they're doing some sort of altruistic service because they can be making 20 times that in some sort of consulting firm. They are out of touch with the regular working people. The median income in this country is somewhere around $60,000. So they want to push predictive policing. So Palantir has secretly been using New Orleans to test its predictive policing technology. You ever see the Majority Report? Think about this. They're not satisfied with just waiting for crime because there are some reforms that have happened. Bail reform. Now, what happens when there's bail reform is that big giant corporations start to lose money. They can't extort family members for bail for someone who's committed a minor offense. And these judges, they just pass these sentences out without a care. Um, I want to show a little bit more because I know the stream has been going on for a long time. I want to show a little bit more of the video that Alec made. Harris County, let's see. Well, anyways, in this video, and you can find plenty of these videos. I mean, you can see judges, these arrogant little pieces of shit, sitting up in front of, on their big high pedestal, looking down at these little peasants below them pleading their case. And if they don't say the right thing, like you can't say shit if you're in front of a judge. You can't say anything. They don't care. And if you speak when you're not spoken to, or if you try to plead your case and they don't want to hear it, they can snap their fingers and they can say, your bail just went up $1,000. How is that legal? How is that okay to give someone that much power so that just because their ego has been offended, they can inflict massive suffering on your life? And they put you in handcuffs and they drive you back to the county jail. Have an environment that smells like a room that's been where you left dirty socks in your room for a month and went on vacation. You go into that environment. You wear a scratchy, thin uniform. If you don't have a t-shirt, when you get locked up, you have to buy one. They're not going to give you a fucking t-shirt. They're going to give you a material that feels like cardboard to wear. 2 suits. 2 shirts, 2 pants. Typically, is what they give you. No underwear. If you don't have underwear on, you have to buy it. They're not going to give you underwear. If you don't have socks on, you have to buy it. And these are mainly in the county jails. In the state jails, you get a little bit more because, of course, you're going to be there for a lot longer. But still, it's the same system. And then you're dealing with more higher levels of danger, potentially. So I was in... let's see, Graham Beasley. Sam Cedar tried to gain some relevancy by allying himself with H3H3. I don't think the kids bought it. Low ratings, sad. Yeah, I don't know. H3H3, what is that? Oh, it's content. Yeah, well, I have to check them out. So let me give you a story. I was in, let's see. I think it was Delaware County. George W. Hill in Delaware County. It's a terrible prison. It's a county jail. A lot of the people that are in there for minor offenses, and there is some, gang-related activity in Chester, PA. And but for the most part, I mean, you're not really afraid of the other people that are around you in prison. Some people are. Like when you get your commissary, Um, shit, I got so many fucking stories. Let me tell this one first. So my cellmate, a young black man, he was in jail, and this is a story that he told me. He worked for a company. I don't remember what it was called, and I wouldn't say it even if I did. But he worked for a company where he quit or he got fired, one or the other. He was owed a paycheck, so his boss said, "Come and get your paycheck." He went to his boss, picked up his paycheck, and his boss had called the police on him. Now they claimed that after he was fired or after he left, he came back and he robbed the place. There's a couple of questions that I have there, and all of this is hearsay. But the man seemed very nice, very humble, very scared person, a person that didn't really fit in prison. You know, a lot of people, they're pretty street if you're in jail. It's a sort of class of people. So this guy, my cellmate, would tell me about his difficulties because he had just had a child. So he was married, his wife was at home, and he just had a child. And he was eligible for house release. But in order to get house release, they had to pay to set up a landline in their home. Nobody ever has a fucking landline in their home anymore. They had to pay, either hundreds of thousands of dollars. And this was just a guy with a regular day to day, paycheck to paycheck job with a family to support. Not dangerous, not violent in any way. He sat in that cell with me for over 3 months, talking on the phone to his family, and they're paying, probably at least $50, $60 a week to make phone calls to him. And they couldn't get, because he was in jail, he's a primary caregiver to his family. They couldn't raise, they're begging their relatives for money to install a landline so that they can install the technology they use to put a monitoring device around his ankle. We're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, right? But this guy could not get out of jail because of that loophole. So, I guess in California, it's $70,000 the taxpayer pays per person in prison. So let's see. $40,000. Okay. The median income in this country is somewhere around 60. And I would say that there's a good amount of people in the working class, just your regular average people, probably make around $40,000 a year. The taxpayer spends $40,000 for each person each year in jail. That's about as much as most people make. So they kept this man in jail who had not had a chance to go to trial. So 4 or 5 months, I don't know how long he sat there. He would not plead guilty, and that's why he was still there. So you go in front of a judge and you have a preliminary hearing. You don't say anything. They just tell you, okay, we're going to send you to the county jail, or we're going to give you a bail, or we're going to release you on your own recognizance. They can choose to do that, but the judge is the only one that can choose to do that. This man had no criminal history, no history of crime, robberies, drug abuse, anything. Just a working class man with a new child, sitting in prison for 3 months, terrified and scared, being tortured in isolation, being tortured through starvation, and being placed in an environment where the prison guards look at you as if you raped everybody in the neighborhood. And that's what they look at you like. You're just a violent, disgusting piece of shit. So the prison guards will beat you up if they feel like it, if you mouth off to them. And think about it, you're in a pretty tough environment. So of course you're not going to always be in the best mood. So anyways, I don't know what happened to him. I don't know what happened. He was going to go to court. He was going to go to trial because he didn't rob the place. Why would he go back and pick up his paycheck if he had just robbed the place? But they don't care. They're more than happy to side on the side of the employer, lock you into prison, because they don't not only want to react to crime, because now there's not enough crime to react to, or the bail reform is emptying out the prison beds. So they're not getting that $40,000 or $70,000 a year from the tax person with these private prison companies. Geo, I think, is a company that owns Delaware County Prison. Well, let's take a look at Geo's annual report. All right. They locked the one for 2020. I'm not paying for it. $2,500 million revenue. Look at these people. These are kidnappers and torturers. And they have made this system that punishes poverty and that punishes the people who are marginalized on this outcast of society, that punishes people who struggle with drug addiction. This is a punitive system, and it is a system to make massive amount of profits for companies like this. George Zoli, Richard Glanton, Christopher Wheeler, Guido Van Howerman, Ann Foreman, Scott Kernan, Julie Wood, Jose Gordo, George Zoli, Brian Evans, Jay Donahue, Ann Schlarb, Joe Negron, Dave Venturella, Richard K. Long. The mainstream media would want you to think that these people are heroes and that they are protecting you from dangerous people in our society. They are only propagating a system that hurts poor and marginalized people. They are filling their pockets full of money and they are torturing people. They cut costs in prison and nobody can see it. Nobody can see inside of these facilities that they run. They claim to be correctional institutions. They claim to be institutions that are going to fix people and send them back out in society better than when they came in. They do nothing of the sort. So, Planter. So in May and June 2013, when New Orleans' murder rate was the sixth highest in the United States, the Orleans Parish District Attorney handed down 2 landmark racketeering indictments against dozens of men. Program began. The partnership extended 3 times. Predictive policing technology has proven highly controversial wherever it is implemented. And then they have companies like this. So Planter established a philanthropic relationship with the city through Mayor Mitch Landrieu's signature NOLA for Life program. So they claim to be a philanthropic organization, but they're manufacturing crime. These programs, this predictive policing, it disproportionately targets poor and marginalized communities, mostly communities of color. These are racist algorithms. So now we have literal racist algorithms that the police are using to fill more prison beds up. With your tax money, you pay to lock up that guy who was arrested because he lost his house, lost his car, lost his job, and ended up sleeping out on the street in a tent. You pay to house him in terrible conditions.
yes, no. I don't expect anything but a yes or a no, not a maybe so, or a yeah, or anything else, or something. I heard what you said. The bond just went up to $2,000.
In a civilized society, in a just society, that judge, when people see this, he should be taken from that seat, placed in handcuffs himself, and he should have to sit in jail for a couple of days for being an arrogant piece of shit. She should be able to speak to him however she wants. She's supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. She's not there in a Hannibal Lecter suit. She's not there wrapped up in handcuffs. She's obviously not convicted of a dangerous crime. And just because she doesn't talk to him the way he wants to and feed into his egotistical bullshit, he's able to double her bail.
Bail was actually designed for the very purpose to release people prior to trial, so that we didn't keep human beings who are presumptively innocent in a jail cell, away from their families and their communities and their homes, before we determine whether they're guilty of anything. But over the last century, and particularly over the rise of mass incarceration in the last 40 years, we've started to use money bail as a way of keeping poor people in jail prior to their trial. The vast majority of people who are arrested by our criminal punishment bureaucracy are poor, and they're disproportionately people of color. And all over the country, no matter what they're charged with, the decision about whether to keep them in jail cell or not is made on the basis of how much money they have in their pocket.
So, hmm, so we'll continue down with Alex's thread. He says also the evidence for euphemism, and we're going to look at Planter. It's a predictive policing technology. It's frightening stuff. It's an algorithm that targets poor, marginalized communities. They use these systems, these algorithms, these things that come in. They come in and say that they're to help optimize, make more efficient the system. And what they actually serve to do is just target marginalized poor communities, target people of color, and send more bullies and thugs into their communities to lock them up and put them in jail. There's a concerted effort to prey on them, and these things do not work. These things don't work. Just like the war on drugs does not work. The war on drugs doesn't fucking work. We've lost that war. Why are we still fighting it? We're fighting it because they've created a massive industry and they don't want to let go of it. I had an article up. Oh, here we go. So, with so much massive support for the legalization of marijuana, a drug that is not harmful in any way, you can abuse anything, but marijuana is something that should be fucking 100% legal. Um, so, one second. Why are organizations fighting against marijuana? We can't honestly discuss issues like this in our society because of the propaganda, because of the conflicts of interest. So, on its face, massive, massive, overwhelming support for the legalization of marijuana. Joe Biden could do it today with a pen. He could decriminalize it federally. But he's not going to do it. Why is he not going to do it? Well, let's take a look. Let's see why. I mean, Credit Card Joe, we all know, is in the pocket of big industry. And he has been his entire political career. And he's also one of those tough on crime people. So it's not surprising that he's not very eager to jump in and legalize marijuana. But who's fighting against the legalization of marijuana? 5 entities still fighting against marijuana legalization despite the changing tide. The tipping point is past. 23 states now allow medical usage of marijuana, and 4 have already legalized it for recreational use as well. President Obama has endorsed medical cannabis, and his administration has indicated that it could soon move it off the restrictive Schedule 1 Controlled Substance Act. Marijuana is scheduled just like fucking heroin and cocaine. Are you fucking kidding me? These people are out of touch, though. These people are fucking out of touch. You know, I've lived in different communities. I've interacted with different kinds of people in my entire life. I lived in an area that was mainly populated by Mennonites. And I was told by someone that they see smoking a cigarette just like you're smoking marijuana, and they saw me smoking marijuana like something that was evil. It's because they were not exposed to it. They're not exposed to anyone who smokes it. So they'll buy into any kind of bullshit propaganda that you put in front of them because they have no literal experience with it. So, its administration and there are still forces fighting against tooth and nail to uphold positions, writing op-eds about the danger of marijuana. And the stream, a lot of it has been about, this New York Times article that this guy who works for the police department, who would benefit from an increase in crime, who skewers statistics to make it look like crime is increasing when it's not. And he was a CIA operative and probably still is. So there's also consultants. There's also a lot of organizations that are fighting against the legalization of marijuana because it would affect negatively, guess what? The prison industry and pharmaceutical companies. Everybody, just because of the COVID vaccine, now thinks that pharmaceutical companies are somehow good humanitarian entities. The United States of amnesia. Compared to pharmaceutical pills, marijuana is cheaper to produce, more effective, and carries fewer side effects. It has been shown to be an effective painkiller that can reduce or eliminate the need for patients to take opiates. While ironically, prescription meds like codeine, hydrocodone, and oxycodone are behind the nation's most pressing drug addiction crisis. I have been clean for more than 4 years. The reason I have experience inside the prison system is because I had a drug addiction. And the thing that introduced me ultimately to much harder opiates was Oxycontin, which actually is just as hard as any of the hard opiates. Although nowadays you have a lot of people overdosing from fentanyl, which is pretty frightening. But Oxycontin was flooded in the streets. They unapologetically overprescribed it. They got a lot of people hooked. When you have an opioid addiction, your body feels like it's on fire if you don't get more of it. It is a physical addiction, and it is terrible, and it is very hard to beat. So they're more than happy to push that shit. Codeine, hydrocodone, oxycodone, all of these heroin-type drugs that pharmaceutical companies make, but they're going to fight legalized pot. You know, if you smoke pot all the time and you don't smoke it for a few days, you might get a couple of headaches. You might feel a little anxious. You might feel a little bit tired or whatever, but you're not going to experience anything like withdrawal from oxycodone. Police unions, local police forces depend on the war on drugs for 2 reasons. 1, federal grants and equipment they receive in exchange for busting users and dealers. Furthermore, police take advantage of civil forfeiture processes to pad their budgets with cash that is allegedly involved in drug crimes. We'll have to do a whole episode on civil forfeiture. Regardless of whether the defendant is convicted or even charged, not only do police unions fight against legalization measures, they actually lobby in favor of harsher penalties for marijuana. Private prisons. Corporations that build and run prisons need states to continue sending them an ample supply of inmates to keep their profits up. They have profitized human beings being put into cages. They make money from it, and your taxes support it. And then they produce propaganda to make you think it is a good thing. The Correctional Corporation of America has acknowledged that it needs the drug war to keep up with demand for its services. They don't even hide the shit anymore. They don't fucking hide it. They're doing it right out in the open. They know that we are overloaded with information. You're going to hear this and you're going to jump to the next stream. You're going to hear this, you're going to jump to the next piece of information. You're going to read one article and you're going to jump to the very next article. We have to do something to try and retain our focus on specific issues, because we're not going to accomplish anything if we live in this amnesic, or I don't know how you say that, but this state of amnesia where we completely forget about horrible, terrible things that have been done to people and are still being done to people by the institutions that are part of our country. And then we see a video with animals doing something weird and we forget all about it. Corporations that build and run prisons need states, so they acknowledge that they need the drug war to keep up the demand for their services. Billions and billions and billions of dollars. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry of exploitation, and it feeds on the suffering of human beings. Prison guard unions. Thanks for the follow. I heard the little thing. I'm just reading the article. So, prison guard unions. Prison guards depend on fully stocked prisons for their jobs. So they have a vested interest in locking up marijuana users as well. In California, a prison guard union spent $1 million to successfully defeat a ballot measure that would have reduced nonviolent drug sentences in favor of treatment and rehab. That is what works. If a person has a drug addiction, you should send them to treatment, you should send them to rehab. My last day in prison, I was on probation and parole. And every time I gave a dirty urine, every time I fucked up with drugs, they put me back in jail. You can't get out of jail. You can't even get bail if you're on probation. You have to go to what's called a gag hearing. So you can't even pay your way out. I couldn't have if I even wanted to. So you have to sit there 3, 4, 5, 6 months until the system processes you. And now I think with COVID, these court dates have become extended more and more and more. So you live in this torturous, terrible, fucked up environment, and you try to find some way to get through it. I mean, when COVID hit, I had already dealt with having to sit in this state of isolation. And I hope that helps me see things a little bit more clearly, because I know the people that are so angry at anyone who refuses to get vaccinated, I feel like they're the people that never really had to suffer in their life. And I'm not, I want to point the finger at someone who hasn't suffered, who hasn't had a difficult life, point the finger at them and say, like, you're a bad person for that. You're not a bad person. You have no control over the environment that you grew up in. But still, I think people who live this comfortable, privileged lifestyle, they feel like the people that aren't taking the vaccine, they're contributing to them staying in their own sort of type of prison, and it's nothing like a real prison. I mean, if you've experienced trouble, hardship in your life, and if you've been locked up, experienced isolation, I think you probably had an easier time with this whole COVID lockdown thing. You had already developed and you already had the coping mechanisms that you needed to withstand that kind of, I don't even know what to call it, like that kind of pressure. But anyways, I got completely off topic. So they sent me to a county jail, then a state jail. And the reason they wanted me to go to a state prison with no violent offenses. I have never committed a violent crime in my life. Most of it was drug related, and some of it was theft, petty theft. And you know what? I took a deal the first time I got locked up, and I took a deal to get out of jail, but they put $15,000 of restitution on my docket. I didn't fight the system because really, I had stolen some small things here and there, and probably amounted to, at the very most, maybe a few $100 or $1,000 or something like that, like petty crime. Having gotten hooked on Oxycontin which is something the pharmaceutical company pushed. And then I got sucked into this whole fucking world of addiction and what all that bullshit. I'll do another stream just addressing that issue. But so because I struggled with my own personal problem, I stopped stealing from people, not taking anything from anybody anymore. And I ultimately paid off. I was on probation for almost 10 years. And I paid something like $23,000. Like the $15,000 in restitution was really only like, I don't know, a few $100. And I just took the deal because I was scared. It was my first time in jail. I was scared. The defense attorney came out. They said, hey, we got a great deal for you. Sign all these things. Whatever. I mean, it is what it is. But I paid very, very dearly. I paid, for every single thing that I did wrong 10 or 20 times over through this fucked up system. And they sent me to this program. They call it SIP. It's a state intermediate punishment. So you go in front of a judge, the same type of judge, the same guy that, like, in this video, this guy. Not exactly him, but somebody like him.
$1,000. Are you requesting a court-appointed lawyer?
Yeah.
Give me a yes or a no.
Yeah.
Is there something you don't understand about give me a yes or no? Don't expect anything but a yes or a no. Not a maybe so or a yeah or anything else or something. I heard what you said. The bond just went up to $2,000.
So the atrocities within the criminal, I'm not going to call it the criminal justice system. What did Alex call it? The criminal punish bureaucracy. We should all fix our language so we call it what it is. The punishment that I received within the criminal punishment bureaucracy, because I didn't look like this racist judge probably would have treated me differently. And that is completely, completely unfair. So race issues come into this in a major, major way. I mean, all the way back to the 13th Amendment. The loophole in the 13th Amendment was so America could hold on to slavery. They wanted to keep their slave labor. I spoke earlier in the stream, the foundation of this country, the ground, is stained with blood and full of corpses. It's no surprise that what it grows is just as horrific and terrible. So, same guy like this, stood in front of him, and he acted like he was trying to help me by sending me to, yes, founded on slavery and genocide. Hey, Thunga, welcome back. Sending me to state prison for more than 18 months. What's up? For nonviolent drug offenses was him doing me a favor. And I was terrified. It's scary thinking about going to a state prison. I've done some time in county jails. But going to a state jail, I mean, Jesus Christ, it's so fucking frightening. Found out a few things from a few people when I got that had been in the state that were on the block in the county jail. One thing is, you don't really have to worry about rape in a state prison. And that was what I was really fucking worried about. That's all the shit on the movies. That's all media. That's all bullshit. There are enough real gay people in jail that they sleep with each other. That they don't need to rape you. I mean, rape in prison is sort of like, it would be an act of power. It's like if you piss somebody off that's got a lifetime sentence, then you're fucked. But so this judge who thought he was helping me out by putting me in jail to fix my drug addiction, I sat in the county jail for 6-7 months. And then they finally cleared me, and I went to Graterford Zona State Jails in Pennsylvania. And that's where you go for processing. So it's a multi-step process. Like if you get convicted of a crime, you are not innocent until proven guilty, unless you have money and power and influence. You are guilty until proven innocent. You put in the same conditions of the person convicted for rape, for selling an eighth of marijuana to your friend in college. So Graterford is just this long sort of airplane hangar with cells up and down each side, and I can look up a picture of it. That's the outside view. I think they shut it down. They spent millions more of our tax dollars to build another prison, a bigger prison, to put more people in. So there you walk down this long line of cells, and you carry your coarse blanket. There's Gippies. So I met a guy in there. It was very interesting. I met a guy that was in Graterford because he was involved in the Salvation Army building collapsing. So there was a crane operator when this Salvation Army building collapsed. That was high. And he made an accident, and he was working on a building nearby, and he hit the building and he collapsed it. And I think I don't know if this is the right article. Let's see. Yeah, I didn't research this very well, but the building contractor, the guy that like ran the crew, the construction crew, he's a guy. He's black. He's a big guy. If he gets in front of this white judge, of course, they're probably scared of him. And one of the people killed in that building was, I believe, like the son or a daughter of a congressperson. So not the crane operator, but the guy that hired the crew was, I believe, he was convicted of something. I don't know. They put him in jail for multiple years, maybe more than a decade. And he was trying to fight the case, but he was in a state prison, so he didn't fight it. He didn't make out very well. I don't know all the details to the case, but I know that he was a big guy and he looked scary. He was the nicest fucking guy in the world, and he ran tons of different companies in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania. He did construction all over the place. He made a good living for his family, but because he wouldn't apologize in court to the congressperson, I believe congresswoman or senator, whose child was killed. I wish I had researched this a little bit better, but this is what I remember from it. And this is what he told me, that the judge handed down a much harsher sentence than he would have otherwise. And this person used their political power to place a man who may have been partly responsible for it because he hired the guy. But either way, he was in state prison, and I don't believe that he deserved to be there. The guy who operated the crane was the one that killed the people, right? So why did they go out of their way to lock up the guy who hired him? Yeah, I shaved. I'm getting my Destiny look back. I don't know what Destiny stands for. Apparently, if you debate people on this platform, you can get somewhere. I'm open to debating anybody. But they were looking for a scapegoat. Yeah, they found a scapegoat. They found a big black guy with a long beard. He was probably Muslim. And that's why he was in there. It's sad. But anyway, so I'm getting off track. Graterford's scary. I never fought anybody in Graterford, but there's gangs. There's different gangs that operate inside of prison. My cellmate, when I walked into Graterford, now nonviolent drug offender, just there because I got caught buying drugs and I was on probation. And the judge, who says he's helping me, sentenced me to 18 months in a state prison for a rehab program. The rehab program didn't come until more than a year after I was in fucking jail because the processing takes so fucking long. I'm getting a phone call. Hang on. So, let's see. Any chuds? Robomax? What are, let's see. Thungar RP. The people responsible for hiring Derek Chauvin should be arrested. 2, using this facile logic. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the people who hired him, right, they should be held responsible. But it doesn't matter because they're already within the system. So, the people that are within the system never get held accountable. Chuds are right wingers. Yeah, I don't think there's any chuds or right wingers. I don't know. It's weird. I mean, like I live in call them Hicks. I live in Pennsylvania, and yeah, I like that Grand Blue. I just called people because like I think we've gotten so into bashing people that come from a different political perspective, and like Pennsylvania is a pretty diverse group of people. Like Philadelphia is like very very Democrat, very liberal, and you go outside of Philadelphia and you got some more conservative areas. But like I lived in Montgomery County for a while, and those people were a lot of them were conservative, but it was just because they were Christian. So like they voted Republican because they're against abortion, which is pretty. It's sad that there's like one issue voters like that. But yeah, like MAGA people, fuck them. They started coming to Philadelphia before the election, and it's crazy. Like there are people in Philadelphia that'll like shoot these assholes, and they were like drove down my street one day, shouting like "Go vote Trump." I turned around and shouted "Fuck you," and went back into my house. But they normally don't come around here, not to Philly, and I don't have any respect for them. But I think they're deluded, they're delusional, and not every Republican is a racist, even though a lot of them probably are. And I kind of feel like, look, if everything's split 50-50, we need to get some movement somewhere, especially with like, third party organizations. So we're going to have to reach out and try and, convince the other side that we can find a place where we all agree. Um, Grand Burlesque guy says, I'm more concerned with people who hold actual power in this country, not some random Trump supporters. Never had an issue with any in my life. I feel like a lot of leftists online just haven't been outside in a long time. Yeah, I mean, I go outside. I go outside every day. I work a job where I have to interact with people, which was great for me during COVID because I have to like go to houses and do presentations and do stuff like that. But I talk to everybody. I talk to right wing, left wing, and I treat people all like just like human beings, and everybody has the same basic needs and drives when it really comes down to it. And I think the problem on the left, and especially with a lot of organizations like TYT or Sam Cedar, or even like the guy that's on Twitch, the DSA guy, Mike from PA or whatever. Like all they can do is just shit on like people like Mike Lindell. Like he's an easy target, um, and right. I like that. I like the chat's heating up, which is great. So these people wouldn't be in power if there weren't people supporting them. As a reflection, there are reflections of those people they weren't here. But I guess I mean, well, what about the Democrats though? Like, are we a reflection of the Democrats? Because I don't feel like I have in the past. I voted for Democrats. I don't think I ever would again. But I don't feel like I'm a reflection of any politician, honestly. Um, don't go RP. Yeah, I think how many left? See, I think like it seems like everybody in the chat, and of course I have a very small audience. It feels like everybody in the chat is probably essentially almost on the same side. So um, I think we do have to try and be objective about all of these things and treat people like people. Um, they may wear that label and not understand what they're wearing or what they're supporting, or not even care. Like um, I gotta go help my wife with something, but I'm gonna come back. And I like the chat. I'm reading what's going on in the chat, and I think I have a lot to say to weigh in on this. But I'll be right back. Okay. Let's see. Never. This is. Well, I mean, politics affects our society whether we like it or not. So, um, let me tell you guys about. let me tell you about a coworker I had. I had a coworker, a black coworker from Philadelphia. His name. Well, I'm not gonna give you his name. But anyways, I would ride around vans with this guy. I was doing like a canvassing job, so I was like knocking on doors. And Brock, he supported Trump. The reason he supported Donald Trump was because he said all politicians are against black people. All politicians are lying to us. No politician is helping anyone from my community. At least Donald Trump is not pretending to be someone that he's not. Now, I would argue that Donald Trump does pretend to be somebody that he's not. He's not an outsider. He's not for the working people. He did pretend like that, but he viewed Trump as at least being an evil that he could see, which was very interesting to me to hear that from someone, from a black person from the inner city in Philadelphia. And yeah, like in the chat, I mean, it's easy to get heated online, right? It's easy to get heated. It's easy to go back and forth. And I don't think anyone really typing things online is going to change a whole lot of opinions. But I think in reality, we do have to just deal with people as they come. We put everybody into a box and give them a label based on how they vote. And the problem with that is the issue is so much more complicated than that. It's so much more nuanced. Regular, everyday people are just concerned with feeding their family, going to work, coming home, living in a safe neighborhood, or protecting themselves from danger and harm, going to the hospital when they're sick, etc., etc., etc. So while I don't agree with Republican policies and Republican politicians, I have met plenty of people who vote Republican just because they only see these issues as black and white, or they only see it, they're one issue voters. Like a lot of Republicans just vote Republican because they're against abortion, because they have a strong religious upbringing. And they don't know, like, they don't watch politics probably like we do. They don't pay as much attention to politics as we do. And a lot of them, they hate the hypocrisy of the Democrats, which is something that I think people coming from our left wing type of perspective hate them as well. They're hypocrites. You know, they do the same thing that Republicans do, but they try and pretend like they're not racist. Like Joe Biden is a very racist person. Whether he overtly says racist and does racist things, it doesn't matter. The 1994 crime bill, you know, as far as its effect on the black community, it did grow this prison industrial complex. It gave this judge, in part, the right to raise this woman's bail, to put that woman even in front of this judge. You can trace that back to Joe Biden and Bill Clinton's policies. So it's you know, fight against racism on all fronts, of course, but then we can't put everyone who votes Republican in a box and label them racist. So yeah, so I I don't like where. I guess the question is like, where are we trying to get to? Where are we trying to go? Are we trying to grow a movement outside of the electoral system? And how are we going to grow that movement? Who are we going to allow into that movement? And then are we going to try to grow movement within the electoral system, but well, for a third party? I think in order to accomplish either one of those things, we're going to have to spend more time getting to know people that we necessarily don't agree with, and trying to convince them off to our side. Like, look at what the Fred Hampton leftists are trying to do. It's a group of young black people who are looking at what Fred Hampton did when he united. I forget what they were called. Let's see. So, Chicago 1969, when Black Panthers aligned with Confederate flag wielding working class whites. I mean, this is when this shit was real. I mean, this was fucking real. When Fred Hampton, the Black Panthers were out on the streets, cops were just outright openly killing black people on the street. Nobody did anything about it. We had just gotten out of this era of lynchings. So why would the Black Panthers align with a Confederate flag wielding group of white people? So let's see. Okay, well, in 2016 presidential election, Donald Trump won the white vote across all demographics except for college-educated white women. He did especially well among working-class white voters. 67% of whites without a college degree voted for him. Some post-election analysis marveled at how the white working class could vote against his own interest by supporting a billionaire businessman who is likely to support policies that cut taxes for the rich and weaken this country's social safety net, which he did. He cut taxes for the rich. Since the New Deal, the Democratic Party has been seen the party of working people, while Republicans were considered the party of the elites. That has changed. Both parties are 100% the party of the elites. Donald Trump now flips a narrative to his advantage. So that was another benefit, another thing Donald Trump did. So everybody didn't just vote for Trump because they were racist. A lot of people voted for Trump because he thought he was fighting for the working class. And that's just propaganda. And people listen to sound clips. They don't dive deep into these issues. They'll listen to a little bit of information, and if it's skewered in one direction or the other, they'll make the determination on what a politician stands for, and then they'll move on. And balkanized issues. One place to look for inspiration. So a core question moving forward for social justice advocates and the Democratic Party, I would say change that to social justice advocates and third parties. It's how they can move beyond identity politics and attract working class voters of all races, build stronger coalitions among disparate groups. So how do we do this? Because if we can't do this, we don't have any hope. half the country more or less voted for Trump, half the country more or less voted for Biden, and then a lot of people didn't vote. If we're going to pull 5, 10, 15, 20% to a third party, make it a threat to the Democratic Party, push them left, or ultimately, some point, actually win, or form mutual aid organizations that actually are big enough to, change our society for the better. But they ignored the obvious. Yeah, they did. They ignored it, and people do that. It's cognitive dissonance. People vote for Biden, people vote for Trump. They all ignore certain things. Okay, so okay, this is important because identity politics is going to keep us fighting against each other, and I really don't think when you get online, because I've done it, I've gotten to fights online too, and I don't know how much good it can do. I don't know. Why don't we let's take a look at history, because we have examples of this type of situation happening before. Like the moment we are now in society in this country, people have been here before. Nothing is new under the sun. But we are in a society that only looks for the new. We only look for what's the next flashy, shiny object that we can see, and I'm guilty of that too. So let's look back here at the 60s and this article. I don't know who wrote it, but why not? Let's take a look at it. One place to look for inspiration and instruction might be the 1960s social movements that understood the power of alliances across identities and issues. During this period, a racial coalition formed that might seem impossible today. Why would it seem impossible today? Well, there is a vested interest in keeping people fighting against each other. A lot of it does take place online. So the attempt to cause reconciliation, the attempt to bring people together and get them to agree, is not as entertaining or as as conducive of viewing than arguments and people fighting against each other, hating each other, and shitting on each other. And I'm guilty of that too. And I'll make videos about people like Matt Binder. And you could say that I'm a hypocrite because of that. But what is this whole thing about for us? I guess like we have to have a goal if we're going to get anywhere. So what is the goal, right? Like, is the goal to have a universal healthcare system? Is the goal to get money out of politics? Those kinds of things can be accomplished. The goal of solving people's innermost racist thoughts. It's a lot more difficult, I think. And I don't know if society can ever accomplish something like that. No one can read each other's minds. And it seems like, someone like Donald Trump comes out and he allows everyone to express their most racist thoughts out loud. And he gave the excuse for a lot of people to do a lot of terrible and racist and fucked up things, especially against immigrants. Now that Trump's not in office, those people have quieted down, but they still think and feel those same things. And if we all solidify into our camps and build bunkers and barricades and point our guns out of those little tiny holes and wait for the enemy combatant to come into our view and pull the trigger, we're always going to remain divided. So where are the peacekeepers? Where are the people trying to make the bridge? Where are the people that trying to say, like, maybe 20, 30% of the 50% are racist and, hopelessly racist and they'll never be reached. But maybe there's 20% of them that we can reach. But we will never reach them by, aggressively and constantly bashing their side. So, in the 1960s, when things are a lot more real than they are today, I mean, they are openly killing black people out in the street, but not in the way that they did then. So, or at least not at the level that they did then. So we had organizations like the Black Panthers that actually took up arms to defend themselves. The police have not really changed very much. Maybe I should even say that. It's just like a veneer. It's changing of skins, changing of clothing. But one place to look for inspiration might be the 1960s social movements that understood the power alliances across identities and issues. During this period, a radical coalition formed that might seem impossible today. A group of migrant Southerners and working-class white activists called the Young Patriots joined forces with the Black Panthers in Chicago to fight systemic racism. So how did this alliance form? And how can its lessons be applied to today's political movement? In the post-civil rights era, a militant Black Power movement emerged with the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, forming in 1966, inspired by Malcolm X and other international Black thought leaders. The group embraced armed struggle as a potential tool against organized racial oppression, a radical break from the philosophy of nonviolent protest. A large faction of the group developed in Chicago, where one of the party leaders was a young man named Fred Hampton. Chicago in the 1960s was a brutal place for poor people. Black, brown, and white people all dealt with poverty, unemployment, police violence, substandard housing, inadequate schools, and a lack of social services. Ethnic and racial groups created their own social service and activist networks to combat every kind of oppression. We do rely, I think, a little bit too much more nowadays on the electoral system, and we're not really looking as much into mutual aid organizations. Okay, so let's see. One was a Young Patriot organization. So everyone created their own social service activist networks to combat terrible conditions in their neighborhoods. And the Young Patriot organization, which was based in Hillbilly Harlem, an uptown neighborhood of Chicago populated by displaced white Southerners. Many YPO members were racist, and they flaunted controversial symbols associated with Southern pride, such as the Confederate flag. But like blacks and Latinos, the white Young Patriots and their families experienced discrimination in Chicago. In their case, it was because they were poor and from the South. In his short time as Black Panther leader, Fred Hampton wanted to advance the group's goals by forming a rainbow coalition of working class and poor people of all races. Former members of the Chicago Panthers and YPO tell different versions of the same story of how the two groups connected. Each attended the other's organizing meetings and decided to work together on common issues. Over time, the Black Panthers learned to tolerate Confederate flags as insurgent signs for rebellion. Their only stipulation was that the white Young Patriots denounce racism. Eventually, the Young Patriots rejected their deeply embedded ideas of white supremacy and even the Confederate flag, as they realized how much they had in common with Black Panthers and Latino Young Lords. So we have a historical example of a Black rebellious organization rebelling against an unfair and elitist and terrible violent system that oppressed them, forming an alliance with a white hillbilly hick organization that embraced the Confederate flag. and they saw that they had similar goals, and they got to know each other in real life, and they got to know each other as human beings. And as they interacted with each other on an even playing field, and I doubt they may have hurled insults back and forth, but I think they were committed to working together. Eventually, the white people denounced their racist symbols and their racist views, and they decided to work together. So that can still be accomplished because human beings are still human beings. We're all still human. It's just that the internet has really fucked everything up. I mean, it can be a tool for great good, or it can be a tool for division. Um, I was telling a story, and I know this is going to be, people can view this later, so I would cut myself off in the middle. Let's see. SIP program. Took about 8 months. I don't even know. I think 8 months in Camp Hill, which is the next prison you go to. And then I think it was a 4-month rehabilitation program. I'll talk more about it then. I see you guys are fighting this chat. And I don't know. I don't see the specific issue. But I would encourage you both to try and see where you connect with each other. And I'm going to sign off. Thank you guys for watching. Thanks for participating. I'm not anybody's dad. So, peace, not war. And maybe, let's try to reach out to people that we normally wouldn't and see what happens, People fear what they don't understand. People hate what they can't see. A human being is only capable of doing terrible, terrible wrongs once they've lost their humanity or insulated themselves from the world. People like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, they're so far gone, so far insulated from any normal type of working life that they can build their rocket ships and say they're going to Mars and then turn around and sell them to the military to deliver payloads on people within an hour and conquer the globe with missiles. People like Bill Gates, they can buy up all the farmland as an investment in the United States and not care about the poor farmers that could use it. Companies like Blackstone can buy up as many houses as they want, billions and billions of dollars to create rental homes, not caring that they're hurting generations of poor people that won't be able to afford to own a property to pass down any type of generational wealth. These people are able to do these things because they can isolate themselves from the humanity that they are hurting. The same way prison guards, even though they interact with prisoners every day, they all wear a certain uniform. You wear one uniform, they wear another, and they could insulate themselves among their own group, and they can hate the person behind the cage gets dehumanized. Police officers can ride around the street and they can see all the trouble and the pain in their society, but they can focus on that one bad person that they met, and they can assume that everyone is like them. And they can become racist in their own way, and they can kill black people because they're afraid of losing their life. They signed up for it. There's way too many goddamn cops. There's way too many goddamn prisons. There's way too many goddamn prison guards. If you lose your job, if we accomplish something and we get rid of these fucking private prisons, we legalize marijuana, we start decreasing all the beds that are filled, we start shutting down jails in our society, that would be a wonderful thing. And if you lose your job, I'm sorry to say, you should not have signed up to be part of something so disgusting. You shouldn't have turned a blind eye to all the suffering and pain around you. Because if you're a prison guard and if you're a cop, you've seen one of your coworkers do something completely inexcusable as a human being. You've seen them torture and hurt someone physically in the most terrible and inhumane way, and you've stood by and you've turned a blind eye to it. You have. If you've been there long enough, you have. You should have quit your job that day and said, "This system is disgusting. I refuse to be a part of it." But you didn't. So hopefully we can get marijuana legalized, and hopefully we can shed more light on this private prison industry that targets poor, marginalized people in our society. And hopefully we can all sort of start to get together and we can try to grow a working class organization that organizes along class lines in the real world and actually makes a difference in our society. It's got to start somewhere. We're all accountable for our own actions. This has been Question Authority. It's a long goddamn stream. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you come back. Take care. Have a good night.